Alright, another quick little video. It's the day after we had all that disaster with casting flask hardware yesterday. So, had a couple of guys ask me about my molding bench, and I just finished reprocessing the sand and got it back in the bench. So I thought I'd very quickly go over what I've got here. Yeah, this is my bench. You know, you normally see it looking down onto it when I've got things set up, but got a backboard on it. Got my riddle here, which this is a pretty coarse riddle. We'll add another finer riddle here real directly. Got another riddle here that's just a framed 2x4s. I use it to riddle the sand back into the bin after I've reprocessed it, after I've raked it out. And got a little rake, and this is all a work in progress. Everything is subject to change. Everything changes as I feel it can be improved. So while I was out here dinking around today, I put a hook on the board up here to hang my shovel on. You know, I've got just an old piece of crap shovel that I use to move sand around. And my normal process is when you see me break them open for right now, and that's all. This is all just for right now because it will change. But for now, I'm breaking open those flasks into that wheelbarrow. And what I do is I take that, if I'm not casting until the next day or not going to cast for a few days, whatever the case may be, I put it in that wheelbarrow, and I'll roll it over here by the bench, and I throw a yellow tarp over it, or that yellow tarp that I was mixing sand on. I'll just fold that out enough to cover it. That will hold that moisture in there, plus it allows the sand that's been right next to the castings that's burned out and everything to absorb part of that moisture. So when I take it out and spread it out and rake it, why, it's already a little bit moist. It's not just hard, and it hasn't sat out where the air can get to it entirely and just dried out that sand, so it's hard like a rock. So this way it's easier to break down. I rake it out, then I bring it back in, and I've got my bars that go across here, and we'll move in and see, so we can see down in the bin here in a minute. But I move those out, and then I riddle that sand through the riddle over here, and just kind of fluff it down into the bin. Then I can smooth it out. There again, I've got a couple more pieces of tarp that I put in there to put over the top of it. Holds that moisture in, and makes it a little bit, more ready to utilize. And there's some things that I'm going to do to improve that process as we go along here. Now that I've been working this pretty hard. So, got a little kid's rake here. I'll use it down in here a little bit. I was thinking about it today. I'm probably going to bob that handle off, someplace along here, and either just round it over or put some sort of a little grip or knob or something fancy on there, just to rake it out. It hangs right there. This was an old dustpan that I had that I broke the handle on. I've used it in this sand bin for quite a while. Broke the handle off, so I just smoothed it out. Took a piece of tubing, split it, and slid it on there, welded it up. It makes a real nice handle to do. The downside to it is it's just a little bit too wide to fit down into the sand bin to scoop sand out and up. And I've got an idea for what I'm going to put in there. I just haven't gone and picked one up yet. So that's what I'm using for now. It works fine for that. Like I say, you'll hear a clunk in here when I'm lifting sand, or a kind of a bang. It's this rattling against the crossbars here. So, a few homemade molding tools, bent wire, a little brush. I'll add a couple more brushes. I've got a couple more brushes in my other little toolbox that I'll smooth sprues out with and things like that I don't have a place for on the board, and the board will change. Homemade brass sprue cutter. There again, this is from the era of bigger sprues, bigger risers, run as much material through as we're pouring it as we can, and fill the runners and everything as quickly as we can in the mold. So there again, kind of going away from that, I think, after pouring yesterday with that little bitty sprue with the taper on it. So this is my sand rammer. I made a pattern for it, of course, and cast it out of aluminum, double-ended, and that's why when I'm ramming sand, you'll hear me do the bang up there, and you don't really see what's going on. Well, I'm just hanging it back up. It hangs from either end, depending on what end we're using. Hangs up there fine. This is one I just added. This is a bar I use to strike off sand. It's just a piece of flat bar. Drilled a hole in it, put a screw in. Same way, I've got a longer one for bigger flasks. It hangs over here, so it's out of the way. Just hangs up in the corner. This little tray holds a little plastic tote that I've got that sits right up there, that's normally got my parting compound in it. It's got my little sock with parting dust in it, and usually it's got the bigger riser cutters and things like that tubing. It's got screws to pull patterns with and that type of thing. There again, that's going to change. I've got a little more room up here and down here. We're going to, as time goes on and I take the time to do it, we'll have little racks for those tapered sprues and risers and all that kind of stuff, way to hang things, little tray for the screws to set in rather than me having to dig through to get them. It's just little stuff that makes it more efficient. Got a little garden rake here. Don't use it. It's probably going to go away. So that's what it is. I've been using these for sprue and riser extensions. That's going to change too. I actually have this. These are stainless steel, and I've got it for they're here for a different reason, but for right now we're using them for this. And that's kind of my molding bench. You know, I've got flask sizes up there. I've got my sand mixtures up there, which is just a reminder for me. I don't really need it up there. I've got a galvanized sheet on the front, and my bin's lined with galvanized. This actually lifts off, so if I've got all the sand out, if I rammed up enough molds to where there's no sand in there, or I'm cleaning out the bottom of the bin, whatever the case may be, once the sand's down out of the way, this will lift out. There's a piece of angle iron on the bottom that sets down in, and it's held in place by, there's a couple little tabs bolted on, one on each end, like this, to hold it in place. This is my homemade knee valve. There again, Steve Chastain style knee valve. And the air hose you saw me messing around with yesterday, it runs into a T on this side, and then I've got, so I plug my air hose into the T on the end, and I'm not going to worry about moving the camera. You can visualize what's going on. When I'm not using it, I plug this back onto that same fitting there, so it's dirt and crap doesn't get in. But I plug my air hose in on the end. It's got one end that goes up to this air hose up here. This end comes out of the knee valve, which is leaking. I don't know if it's got crap in it. It's sat for a while, so it's dried out probably. I need to tear it apart and look at it. But it's got the knee valve in here. Works just like that. And I plug this into the snap flat, or into the match plates, and it snaps on, hit the knee valve, it puts air to it, and that's our vibrator for the match plate vibrators. So this neat design sets in there real nice and everything. I need to change it. Next time I have the sand bin emptied, I've got a little too much lip or a little too much angle on the inside of my bin here, and since that's removable, I'll take it into the metal brake and we'll just change that to more of a 90. It's at about a 45-degree angle, just about a 45-degree angle, maybe a little bit steeper than that on the inside, so it slips back on there easier. The downside of that is when I go to use the knee valve, it needs to be more over here. If I'm standing here, I need to have it pretty close to right in front of where my knee would be, rather than having to reach over here. So the idea was I could take this knee valve, move it over, and set it wherever I want. The problem is it doesn't want to fit over this lip, especially with it bent. Otherwise, it would just lift out here and sit on the front, and with longer air hose, it would slide across there. I will probably change that around or build another one to where it goes in and hooks on the crossbar inside the bin and just extends out over, and that's how it hangs. So I can actually slide it up next to the flask or closer to the flask, so it's more in line with where I'm using it. So if we come up closer, when we were looking here, when we looked up, I've got a couple of crossbars up above here, and then I can put extensions on either end. That's so I can hang stuff from there on balancers, like a air rammer or a electric or air driven sifter. Anyway, those are projects that I played with or will in the future. Eventually, especially with bigger flasks, if I'm molding out of this bench, I'll have some sort of a lift to where I can lift these heavier flasks and roll them, that type of thing. For sand, this is my sand after it's been mixed in here. The way I ram up a mold is I've got my adjustable bars here. I can set them wherever, put a follow board on the bottom, and that supports it. So I can put that any place across that I want. If I was building these again, I would probably add a little more spacing in between these bars. I would probably move them to the outside so I had a little more distance right in between. This works fine and it probably gives it better support, but I think I would add another couple inches on either side just to give me more space to reach down into the bin. There again, lined with galvanized. This is the sand after it's been mixed, and right now this sand feels wet. I intentionally left it wet because I'm probably not going to mold anything for 4 or 5 days, probably maybe not until next weekend. So the sand was left a little bit wet intentionally, and you can see it leaves a little bit of sticky there. It will feel drier tomorrow after it's set in here, and I could probably get away with molding it tomorrow, but where it's going to sit here unused for 3 or 4 or 5 days, why, even though it's covered, it will lose a little bit of moisture. So just by sitting, it will absorb a little of that water that I put in it today. Like I say, I could mold it today, but it's a little wet. So tomorrow it might be acceptable. Within 3 or 4 days, it should be just about right. And there again, you get to where you just kind of know what your sand's going to do. Like I say, this is definitely wet and I go more by feel. The way the sand was, and had I been going to cast today or tomorrow, that type of thing, I wouldn't have added any water to the sand at all. There was still enough moisture in it; it would have molded fine. But now it's ready. So that's kind of my little setup for a molding bench. When this was built, I was dealing, like I still am, with space constraints, and how much time, space, and energy are you going to utilize to sand casting. This bench is, I think it's a 4-foot bench is what it ends up being. Yeah, it's a little over 4 foot. Lengthwise, and I'm a little over 2 foot deep, 30 inches, something like that deep. I keep a few hundred pounds of sand, try and keep a few hundred pounds of sand ready to go. When you start dealing with that much sand, it's not a huge thing to maintain it in a ready to cast configuration or a ready to mold configuration if you're using it on a regular basis. If this sits for 6 months or 3 months or a month, the sand's dried out, you're going to spend a day getting it tuned back in, a couple of days usually, unless you've got a molar, and there again, another project in and of itself. One of the little things that I think I'm probably going to do is build a sand aerator. And there again, I'm going to credit this to old Foundry man, or I'm going to blame him, depending on how you look at it. His little sand aerator works pretty well, and for the size of it and everything, and I was looking around, I've got enough scrap sitting here, I can probably pretty much build one. I've got a little half-horse motor back there that I just drug out of the archives that is probably a little underpowered, but I think I'm going to try it, just see what it does. I've got enough scrap stuff here in my scrap pile that I think we can start welding and bolting stuff together, and there's one more project. So we'll see that one happening if we start doing that, or when we start doing that. There's a look at the molding bench. Hopefully everybody's still staying safe and sane and tucked in, and thanks for taking the time to watch.